Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Swena Sada Nirasta Kohakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukadam Ritadrava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We now enter the ninth skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We have completed the eighth skandha and now we are beginning the ninth skandha. So, ninth skandha's topic is Ishanu Katha. We already saw the various topics of each of the skandhas. Eighth skandha's topic was Manvantaras, and that is why we saw Shuka Brahmarshi give a detailed account of all the Manvantaras, and through that the various avatars. We in fact saw 5 different avatars of the Lord in the 8th skandha itself. Now 9th skandha is called Ishanu Katha. Ishanu Katha means the story of the Supreme Being. Now the story of the Supreme Being has been the topic of all the skandhas. We saw in the 8th skandha, as we said, all these avatars. In 7th skandha there was Narasimha avatar and so on. And yet 9th skandha is called Ishanu Katha, perhaps because 9th skandha has the story of Sri Ram. So the story of Ramayana, which comes in the 9th skandha, is considered the most ancient story written, Adikavyam, by Valmiki. And here Shuka Brahman summarizes the story. He refers the readers, the listeners, to remember Valmiki's saying of Ramayana, because that is the original and complete saying of Ramayana, which is considered the original Kavya, and yet it is given in great detail by Shuka Brahman in this skandha, and that is why this skandha is called the story of the Lord, which leads to the 10th skandha, which is the summum bonum of Bhagavatam, the cream of Bhagavatam, which is the Leela of Krishna. So in this skandha we see 2 avatars. We have seen 5 so far: Matsya, the fish avatar; Kurma, the tortoise; Varaha, the boar; Narasimha, the man-lion; and Vamana, the dwarf. Now we shall see Parashurama and Lord Sri Rama. The 2 avatars will be seen in the 9th skandha, which will lead us to the 10th skandha, which is the story of Krishna Balaram, the beautiful pastimes of Krishna, starting from his birth all the way till he leaves earth. All the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes, which is what Parikshit is waiting for, but he is making sure that he goes in the right order, listening to all the avatars, so that he is fully prepared to take the nectar of Krishna avatar, which will come in the 10th canto. So now in this skandha, in this canto, we shall see the lineage of the Manu, which leads to Ram and the story of Ramayana as well, along with many other wonderful stories. So Parikshit begins by asking Shuka Brahmarshi, please tell us about the lineage of Manu. So he prefaces by saying, you told us about all the Manvantaras and all the various heroic deeds done by the Lord of unlimited potencies. He says, Manvantarani sarvani tvayo uktani shrutani me Viryani Ananta Viryasya Hares Tatra Kritanicha. We have heard about all the Manvantaras, which was the topic of the last skandha, 8th skandha, and the various avatars of the Lord Hari of infinite potencies. You also told us about the great sage Satyavrata, which was the last chapter literally of the last skandha. The royal sage Satyavrata, who was ruling the South Indian territory, the Dravida territory, by the river Vaigai, which is Kritamala, by the town Madurai, and how he attained spiritual enlightenment as well as protected during the deluge by the Lord in the form of Matsya. And he was also told that he will be born as son of Vaivasvata to become the Manu in the present Manvantara, and that is why this present Manvantara is called Vaivasvata Manu. And further, Parikshit says, you told us all this, you told the story of Satyavrata, how he got protection and enlightenment, how he became the Manu of the present Manvantara. He says, you also told us about his sons, because Parikshit was told briefly before itself that this Vaivasvata Manu will have Ikshvaku and various other sons. And Ikshvaku is especially important because Ikshvaku is the forefather of Ram. So when Ramayana introduces Ram, the beautiful verse with which he is introduced is Ikshvaku Vamsha Prabhavo Ramo Nama Janaishruta. The Lord Sri Ram, who appeared in the lineage of Ikshvaku, is how he is introduced. Parikshit knows this well, and therefore he wants to know about the lineage of Manu, which includes Ikshvaku, because that will get to the story of Sri Ram. So he says, please tell us now about the various progeny of Manu, including Ikshvaku, and their sacred lineage, and all the various sacred doings of them, and how they surrendered to the Lord, and the various wonderful pastimes of the Lord as well. So, thus requested by Parikshit in that assembly of all the great sages, Shuka Brahmarshi starts responding. It says here, Evam Parikshita Ragnya Sadasi Brahmavadinam Prishtaf Provacha Bhagavat Shukaha Parama Dharmavid. So he is Parama Dharmavid. He knows the supreme Dharma, which is the Dharma of total surrender. And he addresses Parikshit now in this assembly, Sadas, of Brahmavadinaha, means those who are self-realized, all the great sages who are assembled there, listening to this great story. So this is why it has been repeatedly said in Bhagavatam that the story of Bhagavatam, all the various avatars and their doings, their leelas, are listened with great interest even by the great self-realized sages. Because even self-realized sages, Shuka Brahmarshi himself says this, speaks of it with great interest, and all the sages assembled there are listening to it with great interest, because there is nothing more sublime to do, even for one who has realized the self, than to listen to the stories of Bhagavatam. So Shuka Brahmarshi now begins, 9th Skandha. He says, hear from me an account of the posterity of Vaivasvata Manu in its essential aspects, because the full extent of it is so vast that it will take a long time. So Shuka Brahman knows, of course, that Parikshit has limited time, and he is also eager to get to the story of Krishna, and therefore he does not want to take great amount of time here, but he does want to give all the important aspects. So he says, I'll give you all the essential aspects. So now Shuka Brahman begins by saying that at the end of the final dissolution, Lord Narayana alone existed, being the inner controller and sustainer of all, when nothing else existed. So he begins with the beginning. To just recap, this was already mentioned in the second skandha, how Bhagavan alone existed, and then he brought forth Brahma, and from that came forth all the great sages and Prajapatis, and from that creation came forth. Now Shuka Brahman briefly recaps that by saying Narayana alone existed. He says, Paravaresham Bhutanam Atma Yaf Purushav Paraha Saeva Asididam Vishwam Kalpante Anyan Na Kinchanaha. There was nobody else, only Bhagavan. So this is the essential teaching of Bhagavatam too, which Bhagavan gives as Chatushloki Bhagavatam in the second skandha, that Ahameva Asid Agre. He says there to Brahma that I alone existed, and from my being, through my own mystical energy, Maya, comes forth this universe, is sustained by the same Maya, is dissolved by the same Maya, while I remain unaffected by it. So this is the mystery of creation itself. And so that's recapped here by Shuka Brahman by saying, Saeva Asididam, he alone existed, and then from his navel sprang forth a golden lotus, and from that lotus appeared the four-faced Brahma, who is the creative energy. And Brahma then brought forth Marichi, who is a sage, and Marichi brought forth Kashyapa, and Kashyapa with Aditi brought forth the Aditya. So we saw this in various parts of the previous skandhas, especially in the 6th and 8th skandha. It is all summarized here. He says here that the sage Kashyapa was born to Marichi. He married, as we know, he married Diti and Aditi. Diti gave birth to Daityas, the demons, and Aditi gave birth to Adityas, the demigods. We also saw the symbolism between Diti and Aditi. Diti being dualistic and therefore confused, Aditi being without any conflict, and therefore Aditi producing the devas and Diti producing the demons. So Aditi, along with Kashyapa, gave birth to Vivaswan, who is the deity presiding over sun. And Vivaswan, he married a girl called Sanya, and to them was born Shraddha Deva, who is the Manu. So Satyavrata, the Manu who was earlier the sage, as we saw during Matsya Avatar, and who was blessed by Matsya, he is now born as Shraddha Deva, a son of Vivaswan and Sanya, and because he is son of Vivaswan, he is also called as Vaivasvata, and he is the Manu presiding over the current Manvantara. And he married a girl called Shraddha, and with Shraddha, King Shraddha Deva, who is Vaivasvata, had 10 sons, it is said, the first being Ikshwaku. And then there are various sons such as Nriga, Sharyati, and so on. But the first son is Ikshwaku. But before Ikshwaku, there was a very interesting story that Shuka Brahmarshi gives here. It's a very fascinating story, which is the topic of this chapter. He says that before Ikshwaku was born, the king Manu, who is Vaivasvata, did a wonderful sacrifice in order to have a son, because he had no son and he was desiring to have a son in order to continue his lineage, and that is why he did this penance. Before that, it's important to remember that Vivaswan, Manu, Ikshwaku is a very important lineage, because in Bhagavad Gita 2, in the 4th chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna that this teaching of Bhagavad Gita was originally given by me to Vivaswan, and Vivaswan gave it to his son Manu, and Manu gave it to his son Ikshwaku, and thereby this teaching was preserved for a long time and it got lost, and therefore I am giving it again to you now, O Arjuna. And that's when Arjuna asks, how come you gave it to Vivaswan when you are here as my cousin now? And Krishna says, of course, I have come here many times before in various avatars, and in an ancient avatar I came and gave it to Vivaswan. So that Vaivasvata had the son Manu, who is Shraddha Deva, Vaivasvata Manu, and he had the son Ikshwaku, who all got this teaching of self-knowledge, and it was passed down, and that in that lineage is where Sri Ram appeared later. But now, before even Ikshwaku is born, a very interesting story is narrated by Shuka Brahmam. He says Manu had no sons, no daughters, no children, and he was desiring a son especially because he wanted someone to continue his lineage to rule the kingdom. So he did a great sacrifice with the help of the glorious sage Vasishtha. And this sacrifice, this yajna, was especially for having a son similar to Putra Kameshti, where the Devas Mitra and Varuna are invoked. So these are Vedic sacrifices. So Vedas have different types of karmas, those which are pure karmas, nitya karmas, which are meant for purification, and then those which are called kamya karmas, which are done out of desire for having a child, desire for having kingdom, desire for having any kind of powers, and so on. So kamya karmas are those activities which are done out of desire. Those rituals are always of a lower level than those which are done simply for purification. So here this is a kamya karma because this is done out of a desire for having a child. So they do this yajna, and the wife Shraddha, she was subsisting only on milk, and she secretly had a desire to have a daughter. So this is where the story gets interesting. Manu wanted a son, the husband, Vaivasvata Manu, but his wife Shraddha wanted a daughter and she didn't want to tell it to her husband. So, what she does is she secretly approaches the priest who's doing the yajna, not even Vasishtha, who is the main sage overseeing the yajna, but she approaches the specific priest who is actually offering the oblations to the sacrificial fire. She goes to him and says, I desire a daughter through this yajna. So, when this priest he is offering the oblation to the sacred fire in the final phase of this yajna, he is called as the hota, the one who is officiating as the priest who offers oblations. At that time, he remembered the request made by the queen and he said Vashat. So the term Vashat is used to invoke Bhagavan in any yajna. It is said Havishi Vyacharat Tena Vashatkaram Granam Dvijaha. So Vashatkaram is actually a name for Bhagavan, the Supreme Being himself. Vishnu Sahasranama begins with Vishwam Vishnur Vashatkaro. That's how it begins. Vashatkara means the principle of yajna, which is Bhagavan himself, the very principle of sacrifice. So when he invoked the final Vashatkara, at that time he remembered the desire of the queen, Shraddha, and because of that, what happened was a daughter was born instead of a son, and the daughter was named as Ila. But Manu was very surprised because he wanted a son. He told Vasishtha that I want a son. And he was very sure that he'll have a son because Vasishtha is such a great sage. And now there is born a daughter. So he approaches the sage after the daughter is born after many months. And he says, what happened, O glorious sage? You conducted this ritual. You are a great exponent of Vedas. How can there be a contrary result? He says, this kind of reversal of the Vedic mantras cannot take place when you are the main officiator. You are so well versed. How can this happen? Please explain. So, when this question is asked, even Vasishtha is perplexed because he did not know of the deviation made by the Hota, that is the priest who presided over the sacrifice. So, he ponders over it and he recognizes by his divine vision that this is what happened, that the Hota deviated in the last moment. And therefore, Vasishtha now tells Manu not to worry, the frustration of your purpose was because of the Hota, but I shall now do something to fix this. So it is said, this is where it's really interesting. Vasishtha, it is said, through his mystical powers, by praying to the Supreme Lord and by being blessed by him, he made this daughter into a son. So Ila was made into a son now called Sudyumna. So very interestingly, what is now called as gender reassignment surgery, which is done, was first done by Vasishtha. So that is the most interesting thing here, that Vasishtha, through his mystical powers, has done gender reassignment, whereby Hila became Sudyumna, the daughter became a son. So the son grew up to be a very handsome son, and he was given to hunting. So it is said that he went about hunting through a forest once in a beautiful horse, and when he went in the northern direction, he went to the foot of a forest, which is by where Shiva was with Parvati. So it is said that he went to the northern direction so far up that he went to the foot of Mount Meru, where the Lord Shiva was sporting with Parvati, and by going there, it is Shuka Brahmarshi said that Sudyumna became again a woman, and all his followers also became women. So now Parikshit is surprised. How is this possible? Just because he went to that particular land, how can he again have his gender be changed to a woman? Please tell me. So now Shuka Brahman says this is a very mystical story because he says when the great sages all went, when a bunch of sages once went to that land where Lord Shiva resides and sports with his divine consort Uma, It was said that once when they reached there, Lord Shiva was in amorous sport with Uma, with Parvati, and the sages appeared there suddenly. And because of that, Parvati was very shy, and immediately the sages all withdrew. The sages also felt very uncomfortable, and therefore they withdrew from that place and they went to the abode of Naranarayana, which is in Badrinath, Badrikashram. But meanwhile, Shiva, in order to please his beloved spouse Uma, it is said that he said, "From now, if any male enters this reserve, he shall become a woman." So, this has got a very mystical symbolism too, which is that when one goes to see the Lord, one has to have the attitude of surrender, which is very feminine. Therefore, the sages who came there, they came as men, and because they came as men, that symbolizes that they were not fully surrendered. And because they were not fully surrendered, they could not have the vision of Shiva, and Parvati did not like it either. And because the divine union of Shiva and Parvati is the greatest blessing, but they cannot see that being a male, because being a male implies not being surrendered. And therefore, they had to retreat immediately and go away from there without that divine blessing of Shiva and Parvati. And therefore, Shiva says anyone who attempts to come here has to become a woman, which is again symbolic of saying one has to be fully surrendered in order to see me. And there is a beautiful story similar to this even in the life of Meera, the great devotee of Krishna, where once it is said Meera, when she first went to Vrindavan, she went to a saint's place, and she was told by the saint's disciples that the saint does not see women. And Meera replied very humbly that I thought in Vrindavan the only male was Krishna and we are all his consorts. And when this word went to the saint came running outside to fall at the feet of Meera, which again beautifully symbolizes Meera teaching that everyone has to be fully surrendered, which is the attitude of being the beloved of the Lord, being the feminine consort of the Lord. And that is how one can approach the Lord, not as a masculine energy which wants to control and dominate. So, this symbolism is what is given here also, that the one who approaches the realm of Shiva and Parvati has to become a female. This is what Shiva says. And therefore, now the story goes to Sudyumna. It is said that Sudyumna, when he reached that part, he did not know this, and therefore though he was a male, when he reached that, all his followers, his company, everyone who were all male, they were all instantly transformed to a female. And he became a very beautiful female because, as we remember, he was actually a female to begin with. He became a male, now he again became a female. It's all getting very interesting. So now that he became a very beautiful female, he was roaming around in the forests there. And when he was doing so, it is said that Buddha, who is the son of the deity presiding over the moon, Buddha represents the deity presiding over Mercury, and that is why Wednesday is called Buddhavar. And Buddha is considered the son of moon or Soma. So interestingly, Sudyumna is the son of Manu, who is the son of sun, Vaivasvata. And Sudyumna again became a woman. Now he was born as a woman Ila. He became a man Sudyumna. Now he has again become a woman. So he is effectively now granddaughter of the sun. And the son of moon, who's called Buddha, sees this young woman now, who was Sudyumna, and it is said that they both fall in love with each other because now he is a woman and Buddha is a man, and therefore they marry each other, and it is said that they have a son called Pururava. But after Pururava was born, the mother, who was actually the man, Sudyumna, who became the woman and became the mother of Pururava, he remembered that he was a male and he still had a desire to become a male again. So it is all so confusing for him because he was born a woman, he became a man, and then he again became a woman, and now again he wants to become a man. So he is very confused clearly. And because of this, he remembers Vasishtha, their guru, and Vasishtha appears there. And Vasishtha feels pity upon this person because he is so confused. So, this is why it is a great warning. The story has great relevance to even present times, that one ought to not mess with nature, one ought to not mess with what is ordained by Bhagavan. If we go about it, it is said that there are so many repercussions, there are so many mental issues, traumas that come by doing such things as gender reassignment and so on. So, this warning is given by Bhagavatam right here, well before such things were invented. So, essentially, expecting such activities to unfold, Bhagavatam has foreseen all this and gives us this warning because this Sudyumna is so confused, being born Ila as a woman, then becoming a man, then again becoming a woman, becoming a mother, therefore, to Pururava, and then now he again wants to become a man. And Vasishtha, with his divine powers, he prays to Shankara. Now he knows that this is all because of Shiva, so he cannot overrule that. So he prays to Shiva, and Shiva is pleased by his prayer. And so Shiva says, I have to still honor the word I gave to Parvati that anyone who enters this forest has to be a female. But I am also pleased with your prayer. Therefore, I'll give a very special blessing, the Sudyumna. Now it gets really interesting. Shiva says Sudyumna will be a male for 1 month and female for 1 month alternately. So now Sudyumna is utterly confused, and this is how he is ruling. He's got this situation where he becomes a male, but he also becomes a female. So he rules, goes back to rule, but he rules only when he is a male, and he hides when he is a female. And meanwhile, he has 3 sons, being a male, and they go on to rule the southern region, which is the present Deccan region. And they are very virtuous. But with all this, Sudyumna is utterly confused. He has led a very confusing life. And so, as he gets old, he is tired of everything. So, it is said that he retired to the forest and he installed his son Pururava as the next king. So, Pururava, as we remember, is the son born to him when he was a woman. So, Sudyumna is the mother of Pururava, not the father, because he was a woman when Pururava was born. And then again he became a man, but only alternating every month. And with all this confusion from his birth all the way till the end, he finally gave up, gave the kingdom to Pururava, his son, and retired to the forest. He still, as we can see, kept up with the tradition of all the great kings, great sages, the great Raja Rishis, that no matter what, they walk away from their possessions and their attachments, not holding on to it till death, but voluntarily giving it up, installing his son as the next king, and retiring to the forest to remain in contemplation and meditation and God realization. So, Sudyumna, who was Ila, who led a very confusing life due to multiple gender reassignments, finally still attained the perfection of life by retiring to the forest and realizing God. And with that, his story ends and Pururava becomes the king. And with this, the first chapter ends. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.